Office Face-Off by Brandon L. Breeze, from the short story collection, Love and Nightmares, now available on Amazon. It was a glorious Friday morning sometime around the mid-90s. Prince was a symbol, and The Simpsons was still hilarious. I navigated through traffic, blasting alt-rock on my tape deck. Yes, my tape deck. Like I said, it was the 90s. I was headed for the office where I worked as a copy editor, ready to cap off a stellar week. On Monday, I had received a hard-earned raise, and on Thursday, the hot new receptionist, Amber, had accepted my dinner invitation. Yep, things were looking up for Wallace Young. That's me, by the way. Little did I know, my luck was about to run out. I settled into my cubicle, limbered my neck, and arranged my coffee and bagel. Just a little morning motivation. That's when I heard it. The same obnoxious, guttural laugh that had haunted me since freshman year. I nodded my head. Nah, it couldn't be him. I was halfway through a sip from my mug when I almost choked. It was him. My heart sank and my stomach did somersaults. There he was, Godzilla in a cheap suit. Brody Jones. All through high school that name struck fear in the hearts of many, myself included. Wait, what am I saying? Myself especially. Brody tormented me relentlessly. Likely because it's always been the nature of a bully to terrorize whoever shows fear. And in the crosshairs of Brody's overgrown physique and insufferable personality, I showed plenty of it. Wally Young. Brody yelled, "How the hell are ya?" His handshake felt like a vice grip. Brody Jones. I replied, with a lot less enthusiasm, massaging the blood back into my hand. And it's Wallace now, by the way. You'll always be Wally to me. Yeah, well, what are you doing here, Brody? It's my first day, he said, picking up my bagel without even a pause and taking a huge bite. Didn't know you worked here. It's gonna be just like old times. That was exactly what I feared. As the day ticked on, I was too distracted to work. I sat at my desk like a scared soldier on watch, going through all the potential disasters of having that pig-headed bully just a few cubicles down. I dragged my hands over my face, replaying all the noogies, wedgies, and nipple pinches I endured at the hands of that creep. I rubbed my chest, trying to soothe the lingering trauma. But maybe I was overreacting. I sat erect in my chair. Gone was the 90-pound weakling, scurrying to class, carrying an armful of comic books, and even more insecurities. I was Wallace Young, polished, in control, and highly respected. Well, for the most part anyway. Nonetheless, I had changed. Was it so inconceivable that Brody had too? Just then I overheard my name. I peeked over the top of my cubicle, and sure enough, there was Brody hovering over poor Orlando's desk, reveling about the time he threw me in the locker room shower fully dressed. You should have seen his face, the ogre bellowed. And so it began. When lunchtime rolled around, I decided I'd stay in the building, maybe grab a little something from the vending machine. That way, I'd avoid Brody altogether. I waited for the office to clear out and began my trek to the break room. I heard the Mission Impossible theme echo in my head as I darted through the empty corridors, my shoes squeaking on the laminate floors. When I reached the break room and opened the door, there was the smarmy face I'd been trying to avoid. But that wasn't the worst part. Brody was propped against the coffee station, his mouth running like a faucet, talking to Amber. Damn it. Panic set in, and my paranoia convinced me I was the subject of their conversation. I ducked out before they saw me. But then I heard footsteps on my tail. Giving Brody the chance to humiliate me in front of Amber was not an option. I flung open the first door I saw and jumped in. The room was cold and dark. I fumbled around and finally located the light switch and flipped it on. I found myself standing in a janitor's closet. That had to be a low point in my adult life. I eased the door open like a false move would have set off a bomb. I poked an eye in the crack to see the owner of the footsteps. I breathed a big sigh of relief. It was neither Brody nor Amber. Just Judy from HR, probably getting her afternoon cake fix. I raked a hand through my hair and breathed deeply. Can you believe it had already come to that? Brody had only been there half a day, and I was already cowering in a closet like the gangly teenager I thought I'd left behind. Then something clicked in my brain. I don't know if it was the fumes from the myriad of cleansers and disinfectants or divine intervention. Let's be real, it was likely the former. But I had an epiphany. What the hell am I doing? I said audibly. If I don't stand up for myself right now, I never will. I marched out of that closet with my chin up and my shoulders back, a man renewed. I headed straight for the break room, actually hoping Brody and Amber were still there. My wish was granted. I strolled over to Amber as if Brody was invisible. Are we still on for tonight? Before she could answer, Brody interrupted. You're going out with Wally? Brody stood there stupefied, like a homeless guy slapped with a house arrest band. I had seen that look on his face plenty, most notably every time he was called to the blackboard in. Well, frankly, in every class we ever had together. Oh, you two know each other? Amber asked. First of all, it's Wallace, I said, shooting a glare at Brody. Then I turned back to Amber. Yeah, we were classmates back in high school. Classmates, Brody repeated. Wally was like a kid brother. He reached out to muss my hair like I was a shaggy dog. I jerked my head back and swatted away his meaty paw. I clenched my teeth, steaming mad. I guess it was obvious. Lighten up, Wally, Brody said before turning his attention to Amber. Then with two thumbs pointing back at his chest, he said, You see, you need a man who can show you a good time. Amber offered a fake smile, but she was noticeably uncomfortable. Grow up, I blurted out. And then, like I had been momentarily possessed by the Lone Ranger, I added, Clearly, the lady doesn't want your company. Yeah, I couldn't believe I actually said that either. That perplexed look flashed on Brody's face again. Well, look who grew a pair. He then looked at Amber, fixing his mouth to say something undoubtedly boneheaded. Seriously, I interrupted. Give it a rest. Or else what, he snapped. The energy in the whole room shifted, and the tension swelled like a storm about to burst. I said nothing. My old friends, Fear and Doubt, had made a surprise visit. That's what I thought, Brody said. Some things never change. The sheer smugness of his tone restored my conviction. Brody, all you do is run your fat mouth, I said, drawing a line in the proverbial sand. You're not going to touch me. I picked myself up off the floor slowly. Brody's fist had left stars dancing around in my visual field, and I think my soul left my body for a split second. I remembered a line from an old grainy kung fu flick about maintaining your honor even in the face of certain defeat. Although I doubt the scriptwriter had ever taken a shot from Brody Jones, it became an inner rallying cry. I was going to stand my ground, no matter what. Brody had already turned away as if there was no chance I'd even be on my feet for a while. I crashed into him with full force. My momentum actually lifted his bulky frame into the air, and we landed violently onto the floor. I heard a wall of gasps, but in the melee, I wasn't sure where they came from. With my legs straddling Brody and my adrenaline surging, I began pummeling him in the face. Years of pent-up frustration and bitterness flowed out of me like raging rapids. He then reached out with his claws and wrapped them around my throat and squeezed. I felt like a helpless child as I tried and failed to pry his mitts from around my neck. He rose to his feet, still squeezing, and thrashed me into a wall. Feeling like I might black out, I resorted to my last option. I kicked him as hard as I could in the nuts. Not my proudest moment, but I have zero regrets. Brody released his grip, letting out a whiny yelp that sounded like somebody played a flat note on a bagpipe. He dropped to his knees, and then into a fetal position. I hunched over, gasping for air. By the time I looked up again, Brody was being whisked away by two security guards. I yelled out, and for the last time, it's Wallace. During the ruckus, the break room had filled up. However, the gawkers left as soon as the show was over. I caught a few wide, dewy stares and excited chatter as they trickled out. Amber rushed over, frantically asking if I was okay. Despite feeling like I'd been hit by a Mack truck, I didn't let on. I'm fine, I said, waving her away. Let me at least get some ice for your lip, she said. In a beat, she returned with an ice pack and pressed it against my mouth. The cold sensation made me flinch. That guy was such a jerk. Amber pressed harder, seemingly oblivious to my winces. He got exactly what he deserved. About that time, Orlando stormed in. Brody was fired on the spot, he said. Witnesses confirmed that he started the whole thing. The boss said you gotta file an official report, though. Okay, I'll be there in a minute. I took the ice pack from Amber and kept it pressed against my mouth. I guess I should get back to work, she said. Take care of yourself, okay? You've got to make sure you're up for our date tonight, Wallace. Amber kissed me on the cheek and gave a lingering gaze before sauntering out. I stayed behind for a short while, just me and the low hum of fluorescent lights. As crazy as it sounds, I felt more alive in that moment than I had felt my entire life. It was like some primal instinct that lives within all of us had been awakened. I don't know. Maybe we haven't evolved as far as we thought from the days of going out and hunting prey to drag back to our caves. Maybe in our modern world, degrees and promotions are merely a civilized way to stand atop the food chain. Whatever the case, I felt like I was on top of the world. I got the girl, I kept my job, and most importantly, I still had my pride. Now my pulsating lip may have told a different story, but I wouldn't have changed a thing.